Good morning, I'm Helen Swire, Assistant Editor of Reward. Welcome to our roundtable on pensions and financial education.
We're finding that a lot of people who are coming to our helplines are quite well informed. We think that about 90% of them have sort of thought about it quite a lot. The first tranche of people that we saw after the Freedom and Choices legislation was introduced, it was sort of pent-up demand. They were people who were desperate to cash their pots in and had been waiting for the date. But now, as we're getting more into business as usual, we can see that people are having more measured conversations about what their actual options might be. But we are finding that this cohort that are coming through now have got quite, as you will obviously all know, a really mixed pension provision. So there's a lot of DB, people are using DB for their main sort of pension saving and looking to cash in odd pots that they've built up through their working lives for particular events like weddings or buying property for the children. So that sort of thing. So they're the sort of very early findings. We have found that people are much more engaged. We've had our overall helpline queries have doubled. So we've talked to over 70,000 people since April this year, and that's more than double we've talked to last year. So we're greatly encouraged to see how it's all developing.
One of the key issues, though, that we've got to address is that, at the end of the day, this is about the member, this is about the individual. So whilst taking time is fine, for the individual that's retiring today, that is not fine. That cannot be the appropriate solution for them. And so I think one of the things that's beginning to emerge now is that it's fairly clear that schemes generally will not be able to offer the full range of flexibilities. And that's for a number of reasons. It's partly because the administration isn't there. It's partly because trustees are worried about risk. It's partly to do with cost. So I think now what we're seeing emerging now is whether it be trustees or sponsors is saying, actually, what we need to now find is a solution which is holistic, looks at all the key areas that Freedom and Choice have brought in, and that can't be a single solution of, for example, saying we will offer drawdown in our own scheme. Because if you do that, of course, from the member perspective, that ignores the 2 or 3 other pension schemes they may have. Exactly. It ignores all the other assets. Maybe they've got company shares. So all the things where actually there has to be calibration between different savings that individual may have, that clearly can't be done within a single scheme. So I think one of the things that's starting to emerge now is organisations starting to say, well, actually, what services can we buy in that gives that holistic approach? And I think they got a little bit caught in the headlights, if we're fair, and that's probably because of the speed at which the regulation was brought in, because the default position, I think, for a lot of them was to go back to, for example, to their administrator or perhaps to their insurer if it was a contract scheme. And of course, because they were existing suppliers, and those existing suppliers, again, they were caught in the headlights, so they were going, well, we can't help. And I think what's emerging now is actually there's a new generation of companies that are providing these services for the new world, and that is not necessarily the suppliers that those trustees or those sponsors would have used historically. And I think that is starting to emerge now.
I think I'd agree with that. I just wanted to add one tiny thing, is that the people we're seeing are not retiring.
Question for schemes as they wrestle with this, challenge that Jonathan set out about what solutions to develop. not knowing what the demand is going to be,
Yes.
what is it worth and putting the time and effort and resource into now to develop new solutions? Will that actually prove to be warranted by the demand in a year or 2 or 3 years' time?
I think the demand will be there, though. The demand will be there because we've got an ageing population. So, and okay, that will differ scheme by scheme, company by company, but as a general rule of thumb, it will be there. And I think it will also be there because as people understand what these options really mean, actually they get quite interested.